for the Cities Association of Santa Clara County.
Wait,
And Auden, if you wouldn't mind
Yeah.
calling roll.
Ivy,
Present.
Ivy present, Moore. Or I'm sorry, Chow for Cupertino.
Present.
Chow present, Blankley.
Here.
Blankley present, Fleiger.
Here.
Fleiger present, Mock. Mock is absent. Syok.
Here.
Syok present, Montano. Montano is absent. Turner.
Here.
Turner present. Constantine. Constantine present. Abacoga is absent, and it was Mayor Kame able to make it, or
I'm here.
oh, hello
Hi.
for joining us. Okay, so Kame is present then. Dubois.
Here.
Dubois present. Jones.
Present.
Jones present. Watanabe.
I am here,
Watanabe
and
present.
I was going to be.
Oh.
Glad you can make it.
Thank you. Me too.
And Zhao Saratoga.
Present.
Zhao present. Klein.
Present.
Klein present. And did anyone else come in while I was calling roll? Okay, and with 13 members present, then we have a quorum.
Thank you, Auden. And so as usual, we will begin with our consent agenda. We have 4 items on consent. And so I look to my directors to see if anyone would like to pull anything. I see no hands raised, so I go to our public. Would anyone like to make any public comments on the 4 items on consent? Seeing none, we go back to the directors, and if I could have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second, Watanabe.
And Auden, I defer to you to call the question.
Okay, Fleiger.
Yes.
Fleiger. Aye. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine. Aye. Jones.
Aye.
Jones. Aye. Zhao Saratoga.
Aye.
Zhao. Aye. Bybee.
Aye. Aye.
Bybee. Aye. Turner.
Aye.
Turner. Aye. Dubois.
Aye.
Dubois. Aye. Klein.
Aye.
Klein. Aye. Kame.
Aye.
Kame. Aye. Chow.
Aye.
Chow. Aye. Blankley.
Aye.
Blankley. Aye. Syok.
Aye.
Syok. Aye. Watanabe.
Yes.
Watanabe. Aye. And with 13 ayes, motion carries.
We now move to item number 2, which is our an update from our Racial Justice Committee.
Underground vault
If-
here. Right
And-
now, you don't have.
Oh, council member, there we go. And if all of you remember, we began the discussion in June. We didn't have an opportunity to finish the conversation. And so we are continuing that. And I turn to Vice Mayor Jones to continue and lead us in this discussion.
Thank you, Mariko. So I'm going to share my screen. So just give me a second here. All right. So our Racial Justice Committee. So we were originally planning to present this information in June. So we had to dust off a lot of cobwebs to get this presentation ready. And I want to first of all thank the committee and the people that were involved in this process, particularly Margaret, Rich, Nisa, Larry, Mariko, and Steve. But also, we had some major contributions from members of my office, Rania, Cassidy, Grace, and Emily, our San Jose Housing Department, the City of Morgan Hills Housing Department, Silicon Valley at Home, and Santa Clara County Planning Collaborative, as well as the Santa Clara County Police Chiefs Association. So we're going to cover a couple of areas, starting out with background, our focus priorities and framework, our affordable housing recommendations, public safety reform efforts and recommendations, hate crimes against AAPI effort update, and then finally next steps and the ask. A little bit of background, again, this goes back to June of 2020 per board's direction. And as everybody knows that the genesis of this was events that happened in 2020 in terms of an unprecedented health and social uprising. And I think we all recognize that we are not in a position to continue to ignore the systems that are failing our communities, particularly our communities of color. And as elected officials, I feel that we've stepped up and taken the responsibility to advance opportunities for all and make an effort to achieve racial equality through the policies that we create. Our focus priorities, again, are affordable housing, public safety reform, and again, hate crimes against the AAPI community. So just want to give you the framework. These are concepts. So please consider all of these recommendations as a concept. You know, we recognize that these recommendations are really recommendations that aren't going to be a one size fit all for each city. Some cities have adopted some of these policies, some haven't. Some, you know, these policies might not work in your particular community, but we want you to consider all of these recommendations and take them back to your cities and try to adopt as many as possible. Affordable housing, we all know about the housing crisis, rising rents, home prices, but those housing prices and affordability has had a profound impact on people of color. So we have 7 actions that we're recommending to expand housing policies and create housing opportunities for a diverse, and I want to emphasize, extremely low income communities and people of color. And I want to focus it on extremely low. Oftentimes we build affordable housing for, you know, a segment of the affordable housing community that's on the higher end, but there's really a deficit of housing for extremely low income. And what we're talking about is really, you know, seniors, people with disabilities, or minimum wage workers. You know, if you think we're having challenges hiring people to work in fast food restaurants or just restaurants in general, or retail, that issue and the problem is going to get progressively worse and worse if we don't address the extremely low income community. And then also we want to increase affordable housing outreach, access, and also occupancy for historically underserved communities. The first action is to support AB 649. That's Dave Cortese's Affordable Housing Tenant Preference Bill. I talked to our housing department today, actually, and they provided me with an example of one housing project that we have in San Jose where zero and none of the residents in the surrounding community of that housing project had access to that project and to housing in that project. It was because it was a lottery system and none of those residents were able to get a housing unit in that complex. Even though they're impacted, and potentially displaced by the development that's happening in their community, they did not have access to that housing in their community. And Dave Cortese's bill would address that. And I know that's one of the bills that's on our watch list, but it's something that we're recommending that the Cities Association strongly take a look at and potentially support. Action 2 is support a regional affordable housing online portal. Several cities in the county, as well as San Mateo County, have portals or websites that will enable potential applicants to find affordable housing. But what we're trying to do is actually scale this up. So we're encouraging and like to see other cities in the county participate in one centralized portal. And I know there's some concerns about jurisdictions maintaining their independence and also having market-specific information to specifically target the residents in their cities. And you could design a portal to accommodate all those qualifications and criteria. And so what we want to encourage is for all the cities to consider or look at having a centralized portal that, again, economies of scale in terms of the cost, in terms of the functionality. We feel that that would be a pretty strong strategy to pursue in order to, again, have a system that's going to be able to have all the features and functionality that the community would need in order to find affordable housing. One good example would be a multilingual platform, and there's other examples of what a robust platform would look like. So action 3 is affirmatively furthering fair housing. And there's 4 tools that we're recommending to combat discrimination and overcome patterns of discrimination. 1 is expand HUD outreach. 2 is to support countywide assessment on fair housing. 3 is to strengthen and adopt inclusionary housing policies. And then 4 is to strengthen or adopt citywide fair chance housing policies. And then action 4, prioritize community engagement in the upcoming housing element update process. State law requires engagement with both communities of color and lower income residents. Also, there's federal laws around fair housing. And so as cities, we're required to go through this process. What we want to do is encourage our cities to embrace this process and try to identify opportunities to do outreach, identify and provide housing for communities that historically have not had access to housing in our communities. And action 5 is develop a statement of support for land use changes that diversify communities. And that really means just exploring policies that allow for more affordable units in high cost, transit-rich communities to really diversify the type of housing that we see in those communities, as well as diversify the racial and economic makeup of those communities in our county. And then action 6 is increase housing education for diverse populations. And what that really means is to have a robust countywide campaign or strategy or initiative to really educate homeowners, educate the community about home ownership opportunities, particularly with marginalized communities. As we all know, the best way to create generational wealth is home ownership. And we have a large part of our community that has been locked out or excluded from the opportunity to have home ownership. And we want to make sure that they have that opportunity because, again, we want to create generational wealth. And then action 7 is endorse the 2020 community plan to end homelessness and develop an implementation plan. Several of our cities have already adopted that plan. We want to encourage and get all of the cities in the county to adopt that plan. Again, I know that it's not a one size fits all strategy, but we've been very successful in, again, talking to our housing department. We're one of the unique counties in the state in terms of having multiple jurisdictions coming together and working together to come up with a plan and actually implement and execute on that plan. So we want to keep that momentum going, and we want to have everybody participate. Public safety reform. So we entered into a collaboration with the Santa Clara County Police Chiefs Association. And a big part of that obviously is coming out of the George Floyd incident and murder, and developing or rebuilding trust with the community, having more accountability, having more transparency, having more community engagement. And I can tell you that our conversations with the police chiefs has been very productive. They've been very open to those conversations. They actually provide us with a list of all of their initiatives and that they've been working on or moved forward or adopted. And that's part of your appendix. So please take a look at that, and you can see a lot of the good work that the Police Chiefs Association and the different departments have been undertaking. A big part of that is looking at proposals that can address some of the big issues that the police have been encountering with the community, and some of the issues and problems that the community has had with policing. And the Police Chiefs Association in several cities in the county have focused in on one particular strategy that they feel will go a long way in addressing some of the concerns, issues that have arisen through policing. And that revolves around really using technology, as well as other aspects of policing, like accountability, and really going through and understanding and reevaluating and revising their duty manuals, engaging in de-escalation training, community engagement around events like Coffee with a Cop, community safety meetings, National Night Out, very focused on transparency. And again, I want to commend several of the cities that have really done a great job of focusing in on these areas and really engaging with the community and being open to change. So going back to a focus and recommendation that came out of that whole process was a focus on technology. So a virtual reality technology that the police can use to train and engage in de-escalation and crisis intervention and other aspects of training, where right now it's more difficult and challenging for them to train officers in a real world scenario because of just the logistics around it. So they found that using a technology like virtual reality has made it a lot easier for them to take the trainees through so many different scenarios that they're going to encounter when they become full-time police officers, as well as take them through those scenarios where we've had issues in the past around use of force. And so we're really focused in on and advocating for every city in the county to adopt that virtual reality training, because we think that's going to be a game changer in terms of how police engage with our community, how they're trained about use of force, and how they have positive outcomes as opposed to negative outcomes. Last is hate crimes against the AAPI community. The county has formed a task force on hate crimes, and that was led by Supervisor Chavez and San Jose Council Member Esparza. And that task force has met several times, and we're going to continue to engage with the task force members as well as other members of the community to create and come up with recommendations from our committee in terms of moving forward with trying to address hate against the Asian community. So that is my report. And then on to the next steps. Again, these are all recommendations that are concepts. Again, we realize that each city is different. There's no one size fits all, but we feel like these recommendations that we're putting forward are going to be significant game changers to improving the quality of life for members of our community who have historically not had representation or opportunities or the ability to advance and improve their quality of life. So we're really excited about the recommendations. I'd like to ask each member city to consider adopting as many as possible. And that's my ask, and that's the end of my report. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jones. And so I do want to see, would Mayor Fliger or Mayor Constantine, I know that you both have been heavily involved with this in the initial stages. Would either of you like to add any comments to what Vice Mayor Jones has said?
I think he did an excellent job. He covered so many different things. And of course, the big thanks to his staff, who I know helped a lot to put this together. And even when we were working on the different initiatives. So great job, Vice Mayor, and thanks to your staff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ditto.
And I see Andy, you have your hand raised.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that we have a representative here from the Chiefs Association. Ian White is here if anybody has any questions for the Chiefs. We had been working with Chief No last year, and now we are working with Chief Berg from Campbell. And he is unavailable tonight, so Ian White from the Campbell Police Department is here on his behalf. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew we had somebody here if you had any questions for the Chiefs.
Thank you. And does anyone have any question for, and I apologize, Mr. White, I don't know what to officially call you. So, but any questions for Mr. White? I guess I do have one. I know that since it was June when we last spoke, one of the recommendations was to send a letter to post. And so the question to either Vice Mayor Jones or to the Chiefs is that letter still necessary? Has there been any, I guess, any simulators been approved, or is that still a pending ask?
No, thank you for the question. So I think one of the reasons that Chief Berg had asked me to speak to you guys was specifically in regards to the VR or VRDT training through post. I think the ask from the Chiefs Association was a little more leeway with choosing which VR systems. Some of our agencies, I know Sunnyvale and San Jose, and I believe the Sheriff's Office, it has requested the VR units through post. I don't believe there's been any approved training at this point, or they haven't gone live. Some of us other agencies have gone with private vendors like Axon, who are law enforcement vendors. We just received our first 2 VR units and have seen the stuff that they're producing in conjunction with law enforcement on the back end for some of the simulator scenarios. So this is all new technology, but I know it's been used in sports and it's very promising in its results. So I think we just want to, I think the ask was that we just not necessarily go with only the post road. We can still get post approved training through these other technology providers, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, but yes, we are moving forward, and I think that's the plan for many of the agencies now.
Well, thank you for the clarification, and thank you for sharing what has transpired since we last met with the Chiefs Association in June.
Thank you.
Any questions from any directors? Yes, Mayor Blankley.
Sorry, I'm just gonna show my ignorance here and ask for clarification on SB 649. What exactly does that mean? I mean, what would we be, what are the action item would be to what? I don't understand the verbiage.
So right now, as a Cities Association, we have a watch position that my desire would be for one, the cities association to support it, and then two, if the individual cities support it, that would be a positive as well. And as far as like what is it, it's the example that I actually used was a really good example. So you had a development or you have redevelopment in a particular community, but you potentially cannot have, the community could potentially not have access to the housing that's being developed. And we had a real world example of that where we had a housing development in San Jose where none of the local residents were able to get housing in that development. So what the bill would do would be to create a preference within the limits of the law so that those local residents would have access or an opportunity to have that housing.
Okay, so that's what anti-tenant displacement means?
Yes.
Okay.
And my only question is, since it's a watch, is this a 2-year bill? Or is this something that requires or will be seen pretty quickly?
It's a 2-year bill.
Okay. Any other questions of Vice Mayor Jones? Any comments to what has been presented? I appreciate, I'll start, and I appreciate how you've provided a menu of a variety of options for everyone, understanding that one size doesn't fit all. I know in Los Gatos, we've taken several of the recommendations, and our police department has taken a review of some of those, and we've approved that through consent as well. So I appreciate you initiating the discussion and giving us more information for us as a council to review.
Thank you. If I know everyone's an A student in the Zoom meeting, so everybody has read our report, and it's pretty extensive with a lot more detail. So Marie, I know you've already read the report, but reread it and you'll get more detail in terms of Cortese's bill and the other recommendations as well.
Yeah, no, it's very well done report, and your verbal report was really good too. I just really was not familiar with the anti-tenant, that term.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when the local residents are being displaced by development.
Right, but it's not about specifically race or low income. It's about the residents.
Right.
Right.
That's correct.
Right. It's so something in Gilroy is for Gilroy residents who meet those criteria. And something in San Jose is for the San Jose residents who meet that criteria.
Right.
Right.
For those projects that are being developed and displacing the local community. Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Rich?
Thank you, Mariko. I just want to mention that, it's been a while since we've started this report, and I know that most of, if not all of our cities in this association have been taking measures to mitigate some of the issues that had come up in the past. I know from Morgan Hill's standpoint, we've actually worked with the county in hiring a clinician and used funds to hire a clinician to help our police officers not have to go on as many calls, and that sounds a little off. As we know, we've asked our police force to do above and beyond what they're trained to do, and that has caused a lot of issues that have happened nationwide and in our own communities. And we've taken steps in Morgan Hill so that when a call for help or a call for a welfare check where it might be a mental or substance abuse issue, that you don't have a police officer coming there who's not well equipped to handle that type of call. And so those are some of the steps that we've taken. I would like to hear if anyone would like to talk about what they have done in their cities prior to this report coming out, because it was a I would say a hot topic because it was prescient. But as time goes by, we all know that time kind of makes people forget, and for that we continue this process, because we do not continue to move forward, we will slide back. So if anybody would like to talk about what they have done in their cities, I would really appreciate to hear that, but it's by no means you have to, but it would be nice to hear so that other cities can also kind of get an idea of what's being done, so that we can work together. I mean, this should be a team issue. We should never attack things as one city alone, because one of the great things about this association is we take our ideas from others. And I always tell people, it's like, I have no problem taking an idea or an ordinance that says Los Altos on it and crossing Los Altos out and putting Morgan Hill, if it makes sense for Morgan Hill, and vice versa. I would expect the same from any one of our cities here. So again, if anyone has anything they'd like to share, I would really appreciate hearing it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rich. Kathy?
Thank you, Mariko, and thank you, Chappie, for your report and the presentation. And I appreciate Mayor Considine's request for to hear from other cities. So I was actually planning to talk about what Santa Clara has been doing, and so I was trying to make some notes here because there were so many things. The 7 different initiatives that Chappie talked about, but 2 that I will say that Santa Clara has been working on. One is affordable housing, and actually I had an hour-long meeting this evening with Catholic Charities on a project that they're looking to bring to Santa Clara, and hopefully coming before the council next year. It's 106 units of affordable housing from studios up to 3-bedroom apartments. And really, they gave me a range of what the units would go for, and I mean, a studio was starting at $794 a month up to $1,323 a month, and a 3-bedroom starting at $1,134 up to $1,891. And so I was really happy to hear those kinds of numbers. I mean, those are 2021 numbers, but still, those are definitely numbers that people could, with 1 or 2 people sharing in a unit, could afford. But and we have other projects too. I think last time I checked, we've got about 7 affordable housing units in the pipeline. And of course, if you saw the news in the last 2 months, the Agri-Hood project is probably the biggest one that we've been looking forward to having the groundbreaking for. And so and I drove by there the other day. Oh my gosh, they're just putting that thing up like, I don't know, it's going to be done overnight the way I see it. But I mean, we don't have a lot of land. We've talked about that with our housing department. And so to have like a project like Life Moves that Mountain View was just very successful with, 100 units of it's temporary housing, but at the same time, it gives people, that opportunity to get themselves stabilized and save for more permanent housing. And I will add that the project that I talked about with Catholic Charities is permanent housing. So, but at the same time, if Santa Clara had the opportunity to have, the ability to put in a project like Life Moves, I mean, we would be all over it. So, but we're doing the best that we can under the circumstances. And then getting back to the police departments and working with the chiefs. Last year, then Councilmember Teresa O'Neill and Mayor Gilmore and myself worked with a couple of representatives from the community to form a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force, which the mayor and Chief Pat Nicolai work with directly. And they are actually in the process of doing community listening sessions and also prepared a survey. And last I heard, I think they've had about 1,600 responses from the community to get feedback on what people would like to see changes in the police department. The accountability issues that people talk about, and how to make sure that the budgets that are allocated, are providing for all levels of I guess, public safety, as well as meeting the needs of the community. So we get quarterly reports from the DEI task force. We just had one. And so as they finish up these community listening sessions, I know that we'll get more ideas of what the community is interested in and how we as a city can move forward to make our police department more the way the community would like for it to be. So I'll just leave it at that. So that's all I have to share. So thank you, Mariko.
Thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. And just wanted to put out there as a teaser that we did ask the CEO of Life Moves if he's willing to join us in November to talk about the $25 million that they received from the county and potential partnerships that we could do together. So yeah, Mayor Kamei, we're all envious of the project that you have in Mountain View. Liane?
Oh, hi. So regarding affirmatively fair housing, I think we have the requirement from the housing element to implement that. So I'm wondering what specifically is you are recommending in this action. We are just starting the process, so I've been wondering how that could be implemented in policy. And are you recommending something different, or this is something that the housing element, it's along the same line as the housing element requirement?
Yeah, great question. And when I talked about affirmatively furthering fair housing, which I can never say fast 3 times.
Yeah, furthering, yeah.
I mentioned that it is a federal and state requirement, but that's different. Oftentimes we're required to do things, and other times we embrace doing things. So that's why I wanted to have that distinction. Because of the housing element, it's a requirement. But I want the cities to really embrace that concept, because you can do the bare minimum of what's required, or you can take it above and beyond the bare minimum. And if we're going to solve the issues around housing in our valley, each city is really going to need to embrace how we can further fair housing and create opportunities for people to live in different communities. So that's really my ask on that particular item.
Okay, so for example, the inclusionary requirement, I think we have adopted that a few years back, even before San Jose won the lawsuit, which was great. And so we have a 15% requirement. However, developers tend to find reasons to get exceptions to not implement that. And I realized that also for getting funding, a lot of times inclusionary housing makes it harder to get funding. So your recommendation, then, do you think that would not become a barrier for getting funding?
So we have some of the same issues in San Jose in my district, where we have projects where the developers are reluctant or hesitant to build the inclusionary housing. They'd rather just pay the fee and have the housing built somewhere else. And so we've been very proactive in terms of working with the developers, and encouraging them, cajoling them, begging them, whatever it takes to build that housing on site. And we've been fairly successful. So I have a goal in my district to have 1,000 affordable housing units in the pipeline by the time I'm termed out of office at the end of 2022. We're halfway to our goal. And a big part of that was working with the developers. There are things that they wanted. Obviously, developers always want things that we have the discretion to be able to make happen or not. But a condition of making some of those things happen was for them to build affordable housing on site. So that's an example of what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, the minimum
Yeah.
requirement versus, you know, going the extra level,
Okay.
try to make something happen.
So another question I wonder if any city has policies on is, I think we want our city to be inclusive. Cupertino has been criticized that we are not diverse enough, even though we are over 70% Asian, but it's too many Asian, and that's not diverse enough. But we can say, okay, too many Chinese don't move in anymore, right? We can control who wish to move into Cupertino. So how do we have policies that that encourage more diverse population, but maybe Cupertino is just too boring for some people. That's just too many people, just most of the things that are like family oriented for some population, that probably is just not their first choice when picking a place to live. Sometimes it might not be even whether they can afford, it's just people choose where they would like to live. And different city has different characteristics that tend to attract different groups of people. So I wonder how then, is there maybe a study on, what type of retail stores or entertainment or things that a certain community need, so that they might consider moving to a community. Otherwise, we can't force them.
Yeah. No, I understand your question. So being someone who actually lives on the San Jose Cupertino border, and my district, you know, borders Cupertino is not boring. So,
just too many after school centers.
but again, it's, you know, expanding your vision and horizon. So I can guarantee you that there are a lot of families and individuals out there in the Valley who would love to live in Cupertino. It wouldn't be too boring for them. The quality of life in Cupertino is great, great schools. There's a lot of members of the community that would love to live in Cupertino. When you have a project, when you have an affordable housing project, how do they even know about it? How is it communicated? How is it marketed? You know, are you targeting, you know, different groups in different, you know, channels? A good example is I had a conversation with city staff about recruitment, and they were like, how do we, you know, recruit more African Americans? And we said, well, have you gone out to the Black churches? Have you contacted, you know, that channel to get, you know, the word out and communicate that, you know, San Jose is hiring and we want to hire, you know, folks with a diverse background? Well, that's just one specific example of being intentional, really having a commitment to go out and target and identify a diverse population to make your own community more diverse.
Okay. But I also sometimes think it's unfair if you consider Oakland a very big city and how diverse it is. But then you compare that with Cupertino, a very tiny city that's really one region of Oakland. You can find a region of any big city that's not diverse enough. And now you are requiring any city, no matter how small it is, to be as diverse as the county. That is that even logically possible?
Actually, Kathy, do you mind?
It's a good goal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good goal, but then is that really logically possible?
So whether you'll be able to attain that is one thing, whether you're trying to attain is another. What we're asking folks to do is make the effort. You can't always determine the outcomes, like anything else in life, right? You know, we can't determine the outcomes oftentimes, but we can determine the effort. And that's what all we're asking.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay,
and Nisa, if I
Thank
can
you.
turn to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and well said, Vice Mayor Jones. Really enjoyed hearing your responses there. My question is actually for Mayor Constantine. I wanted to hear more about the funding you received from the county for the mental health consultant. I hadn't heard about that program.
So I'm so glad that
Or was it just a special Morgan Hill?
everything is special in Morgan Hill. So I would be lying if I told you I knew exactly, and I wish my chief was on the line, but I'm wondering if Mr. Preminger might have some insight on that. I don't mean to put him on the spot if he doesn't.
In short, I don't.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to go back, but you know what? I can get you that information. And if I'll send a text to my chief right now, and if I get an answer, I will answer it back to you either in the chat or if there's a moment on the Zoom, I will be able to answer it because I'm sure everybody will want to hear that.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And Larry?
Sure, I'll be very quick. You know, one of the things that we started 2 years ago after a hate crime was basically a unity event. And that first one was before COVID and, you know, having that listening event and how to deal with hate. Last year, of course, we had multiple listening events with different portions of our community to get feedback on their concerns, you know, and it was different ages and different segments of our community, from Spanish speaking to the LGBTQ community to our children, and hearing, you know, any concerns that they have with the police. And Sunnyvale is pretty unique because of our merged public safety system with fire, police, and EMT. Every officer is fully trained in all three. But that unity discussions, you know, led us to, well, we were already releasing some information, but the transparency is a big thing to build that trust with your community. And so one of the things that we did is like put all of our procedures online, put events or put occurrences that are happening within our community all online, you know, all those sorts of things to kind of build that transparency. We had yet another unity session at the beginning of this year for you know, discussing anti-Asian hate. And, you know, one of the positive things, of course, is Chief No and representing his background of coming to the US and representing the Asian community, I think has been very good. So from a policing standpoint, it's doing whatever you can do to earn trust within your community. And it's all the events that Vice Mayor Jones was talking about. You know, it is the pancake breakfast, it's National Night Out. It's all those things of interacting in a positive way within your community is always good. And then the other thing, part of which, and I'll mention a little bit on the housing, you know, the extremely low is very difficult to do, but all of our cities can define inclusionary housing however they want. So from a for sale housing standpoint, you know, we have 15%. We in this past year, we increased it to from 12.5% to 15% for moderate. But for all the rental housing, 5% is required to be extremely low, and 10% is required to be low. So 15% of all new apartments being built tries to add that diversity of income, which helps in the diversity of our community overall. And I think that's one thing that it's really positive, is to kind of intersperse that through every development that's being built within your community to give people that conceivably might not be able to buy into an expensive home in our community a better chance, and or rent within the community a better chance. So I think all those are things that our cities can be doing to deal with the racial inequities that we see.
Thank you, Larry. And later in our agenda, we are going to hear from our planning collaborative. And so they'll have an opportunity to tie in the work that they're doing with the discussion that we're having today. But I appreciate everyone's comments and sharing that information, because that is an opportunity for us to utilize each other's knowledge and resources so that we don't recreate the wheel. But any further comments or before I move us along to the next agenda? I think the Vice Mayor has his recommendations And we ask you to take this back to your councils, begin the discussions if you haven't already. And as Vice Mayor so aptly said, if we can just, the effort is what we're looking for. Andy?
Do you want to have a motion and to endorse or support the report?
Would anyone like to make that motion? Mayor?
So moved.
Ellen?
Second. Oh.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Sorry.
And Auden, did you catch that?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to tell me who our seconder was.
Ellen Kamei.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Mayor
And-
Kamei, I'm sorry.
Motion is to endorse the report, understanding that each city will look at each and tailor it to their own needs. So, do you want to call the question?
Do we need to take comment on this?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, Roland.
You're now unmuted, Roland.
Sorry about that. The only comment I have is that my comment is in the chat. Thank you.
Would you be able to say that verbally for those who might not be able to see the chat or watching via YouTube?
Do you want to read it
Okay.
so that we could just put it on the record?
If Mr. LeBron's not on, I can read it
Okay, go.
if that's
you-
appropriate. So it was at 742. It says San Jose's inclusionary housing fee can be best described as a dichotomy or an oxymoron.
There you go. Thank you.
Period.
Would anyone else like to provide comment on this topic? I see no other hands raised, so we'll bring it back to the directors. We do have a motion and a second, and if we could just call the question.
What exactly is the motion?
The motion is to endorse the report.
To endorse the report, okay.
That they're, exactly.
Okay, Kamei.
Aye.
Kamei, aye. Watanabe.
Aye.
Watanabe, aye. Zhao.
Aye.
Zhao, aye. Bybee.
Aye.
Bybee, aye. Mock. Is Mock present?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay, thank you. Sayok.
Aye.
Sayok, aye. Turner.
Yes.
Turner, aye. Dubois.
Aye.
Dubois, aye. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, aye. Chow.
Aye.
Chow, aye. Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, aye. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine, aye. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, aye. And Blankley.
Aye.
Blankley, aye. And with 13 ayes, the motion carries.
So much, and thank you, Mr. White, for joining us today. And so we now move to item number 3. Item 3 and 4 we've placed on the agenda to commemorate and honor the month. And the first item for item number 3 is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we've invited Ruth Darlene, who is the Executive Director of Women of Silicon Valley. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here. I'm so privileged to be able to speak with you all tonight. Thank you. I wonder if I could share my screen and run through a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation to show you a little bit about our work and what we do.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. So do you see the first slide okay?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Well, good evening, everyone. I am the Executive Director of Women of Silicon Valley. This is a nonprofit based in Los Altos. Our focus is on serving women who are involved with a powerful, sophisticated abuser who may commit acts of physical and sexual violence, but much more often engages in more subtle forms of abuse, like emotional, financial, legal, and technological. And these are the forms of abuse that we specialize in addressing at Women SV. I first want to thank Mayor Flagger for making this visit possible and for declaring October Domestic Violence Awareness Month. How wonderful to be raising awareness about it in this way. Because intimate partner abuse is such a common problem, chances are, if it hasn't happened to you, it's happened to someone you know, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague. It has certainly happened to many of your constituents. And I know that because in the past 10 years, Women SV has served over 1,000 survivors of covert abuse, the more subtle forms of abuse. Many of them, most of them, in fact, come from cities right here in Santa Clara County. And you may never guess that they are hiding this dark secret because there is so much at stake if they expose it. There's so much shame and social stigma attached to domestic violence in wealthier areas like ours, and their partners often threaten to destroy them if the truth ever comes out. So women in this demographic tend to avoid reaching out to hospitals, shelter-based agencies, and the police for help. And these are the very providers that keep track of domestic violence data. So we end up with this idea that domestic violence doesn't happen in nicer areas, but the truth is we're just better at hiding it. About 35% of Women SV survivors have experienced non-fatal strangulation at the hands of their partner. Their lawyer, engineer, doctor, therapist, religious leader, intimate partner. In fact, clinical psychologist Susan Weitzman, who wrote the book Not to People Like Us, Hidden Abuse in Upscale Marriages, she says that the more money their partners have, the more afraid women are of being killed, if not by their partner directly, then by a hired third party. We can't think it will never happen in our county because it does. This is Leonid Yamberg, Silicon Valley engineer. In January of this year, he confessed to killing his wife and 11-year-old daughter, and with no prior reported history of domestic violence. So regardless of the socioeconomic level you're in, the underlying dynamics of domestic violence are the same. It's about power and control. But the more money and power you have, the more resources you have at your disposal to coerce and control your partner, and the easier it is to hide that dark side. And the harder it is for a woman to leave safely and stay safe, keep custody of her children, or avoid crippling debt, bankruptcy, poverty, homelessness. That's why we don't charge for our services, because of the rampant financial abuse in this demographic. Many of our survivors are struggling to put food on the table or keep a roof over their heads, while their partners are still living a very affluent lifestyle. So at Women SV, here's what we're doing to address this problem. Empowering survivors through direct client services like our helpline, our support group, our customized ongoing safety planning for as long as our survivors choose. They come from all walks of life, all races, all religions, but all united with this common bond of being involved with a powerful, sophisticated abuser. We also provide trainings for physicians, law enforcement, healthcare providers, and other professionals, and we give public presentations and work with the media to raise awareness about covert abuse in more affluent areas. You can read my column in the Los Altos Town Crier. These are just some examples of our partnerships that include presentations for law enforcement. I have one coming up next week for the Santa Clara County Probation Department. I've done them for the Los Altos Police Department. I've done presentations for students at Harker Academy. I've done trainings for Kaiser Physicians in San Jose, Valley Med OBGYNs in Santa Clara, that was this morning, and De Anza College nursing students in Cupertino. So we have established the need for our services, and we are working very hard to meet this need, but we must hire more advocates to keep up with the demand. We also want to do more outreach into the schools to educate young people, to help them recognize early warning signs of controlling behavior, not just around physical and sexual violence, but also around financial, technological, and emotional abuse. I was a teacher before becoming a domestic violence advocate, and I do believe that education, when it comes to domestic violence, is the best form of prevention. But it all takes funding, and we don't charge survivors for our services, as I said. I gave you one reason. The other is because we believe it's the fundamental human right of everyone to live in peace and safety in their own home. So we have to find other ways to raise funds. It really does take a village when it comes to addressing covert abuse. And with your help, we can all be that village and continue to reach more and more survivors who are struggling to build a safer life for themselves and for their children. So when budget time rolls around, I hope you'll consider partnering with Women SVA as we look forward to serving more and more residents here in Santa Clara County. With your support, we can keep helping women overcome the oppression of domestic abuse at the hands of a powerful, sophisticated abuser. And we look forward to collaborating with you all to protect the right of every man, every woman, every child to live free and safe in their own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you for the work that you do. It's so valuable, and I appreciate how you are trying to break that stereotype that that it doesn't happen in neighborhoods like ours. So, Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor. And Ruth, thank you so much for being here. I know this is one of your busiest months. I really just want to recognize your work. Many of us here in Los Altos know that you'd been doing this work even when you didn't have the financial or staffing resources, because you're so passionate about it and want to assist these survivors. So a big thank you on behalf of Los Altos and obviously the broader Santa Clara County community, because I know you provide services outside of Los Altos. My question has to do with the numbers that we've seen during COVID, knowing that we were all home and we're very restricted in our movements. Could you talk about the impact of COVID on the numbers of domestic violence cases that you've seen?
Yes, we have seen our call rate double over the last year and a half. We are struggling to meet the need. If you think about how confined, how trapped you as a regular, hopefully happy citizen has felt in times of COVID and having to work from home. Imagine living with your abuser 24/7 and being trapped along with being a prisoner in your own home, having no safe place to escape to. In the past, our ladies were able to reach out to friends, neighbors, relatives, asking to stay at their place. They would have some kind of respite going to work. They would think about an escape plan involving staying outside their home. And now many of those avenues have been cut off due to the pandemic. We are feeling like more and more women are feeling desperate, and the amount of the frequency that abuse is happening to them, and also the severity, as their abusers are feeling more and more trapped, and their partner and are taking it out on their partners. So that's why our call rate has increased. We're trying to hire more advocates, and of course that takes funding, but really to address this unmet hidden need of women living like prisoners while living a life of apparent privilege, but still living like prisoners in their own home.
Any other questions? Yes, Rich?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Darlene, could you talk about how, I guess for lack of a better word, your territory would be? For example, in South County, we work pretty closely with Community Solutions. And they do similar work as to yours. Could you talk about maybe possible overlap, or if you partner with other agencies like Community Solutions?
Oh, yes, thank you. What a lovely question. Yes, so we are in no way here to replace all the wonderful sister agencies that we work with. We are here to augment their services. And traditional domestic violence agencies do have a strong focus on addressing physical and sexual violence, immediate crisis needs like shelter, housing, immigration needs. And because of our longer wait time now, because we're a small but mighty crew, but still small, we routinely refer our survivors to other agencies like Community Solutions, the YWCA, Maitri, ACCI, Next Door. for additional help. Last week, I just did a training for new domestic violence advocates taking the training at NARICA. The week before, I was doing a training for their staff. I've done trainings for the advocates in the certification program at CORA, that's Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse. I've done presentations for our sister agencies, including ACCI, training their new domestic violence advocates. So I'm thrilled with the partnership that we have with our other agencies. And I do want to say we exist to supplement their services because of our unique focus on more covert forms of abuse, on coercive control. We've been doing this for 10 years, and we now get calls from all over the United States, though we primarily still serve survivors in Santa Clara County. We do get calls from other states because when they're looking for an agency that focuses on covert abuse, coercive control, women dealing with a powerful, sophisticated abuser who's got the money and power and resources to hide that very different dark side and exert that power and control over their partner. We are it in the United States so far. So we're overjoyed to be partnered with our other sister agencies.
Well, thank you very much for that, and really appreciate the work that you do. I wish you didn't exist. I wish we didn't need you and services like that you provide, but so glad that you are there. Thank you so much.
Oh, bless you, and thank you so much. Thank you all for your lovely support, and thank you, Mayor Flagger, again. Thank you. I couldn't do this work without Mayor Flagger and the Los Altos Police Department and all of you supporting it. Thank you.
And real quick before we move, Li-Ming, and then I'll move to public comment.
Hi, thank you so much for all the work you do. I think you presented in Cupertino also. And I'm wondering what type of financial support that you have been getting from cities, examples, so we have more concrete ideas for what the cities can do to help your organization.
I'm sorry,
what type of financial support you have been getting from cities? For example, one-time grant or annual grant, or what type of support?
How kind you are to ask about that. Thank you so much. So we've been blessed to be receiving annual support now for several years from Los Altos City Council. They just gave us an award of $40,000 last night at the city. Was it last night? Or the days are blurring. This week, after reading the proclamation declaring October Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I presented to City Council in Cupertino and was then invited to present at their Public Safety Commission, and they've invited me to also present at their Public Safety Forum. Blessed to do that. And Mayor Darcy Paul, Mr. Darcy, as I love to call him, has already donated $1,000 from his own personal budget in the city to our program because he found out about us after the budget talks had happened. We appreciate whatever financial support you can offer because, as I said, we exist solely through the good graces of individual donors, foundations, and other agencies that want to support this work. So we've been blessed to get a generous grant from the Board of Supervisors and from other foundations and family foundations, but the bulk of it is coming so far from individual survivors, and we need to diversify our reliance in order to continue the work.
Great, thank you. By the way, I'm Liang Chao, Vice Mayor of Cupertino. So I've heard your presentation, and then we hope to consider an annual grant next year. So you have sustaining financial support, and I hope that other cities could consider that also.
Bless you, and thank you. You bring tears to my eyes. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. Thank you.
And would anyone from the public like to comment on this item for agenda item number 3? I see no hands raised. And so Ruth, thank you so much for the work that you do. It'll be a nice challenge to see the work that you do eventually go away. But until then, we're here and we're glad that you're helping take care of many of our constituents. Rich?
I just wanted a point of order after this assignment. So if Ms. Darlene, you may leave if you're done, Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you. Bless you all. Thank you.
And Chair, I have an answer to Mayor Flagor's question. If this would be an appropriate time, or if you wouldn't want me to wait till later.
Actually, let's do it. We're in between, so go ahead. I think all of us are curious where you're getting this funding.
Great. So I will read the email that Chief Palsgrove sent me just now. It says, this is a Sheriff Department PERT program, P-E-R-T program, which is the exact same program we have. Santa Clara County Behavioral Health received a grant for psychiatric emergency response team clinicians. The cities with the highest number of mental health calls, teen suicide rates were offered the clinicians. I won't read the cities other than Morgan Hill. There were 3 other cities that received those grants. I guess I can go ahead and read it. There's Palo Alto, San Jose, and Morgan Hill. Selected for the grant. A clinician will be assigned to officers 40 hours a week to respond calls and follow up with prior calls and services. Original funding was for 2 clinicians, but funding has been reduced to 1. So that's where we got the money from. And if anybody wants a copy, I do have the copy of the PERT presentation. I can follow that. I don't know how to put that in the chat, although for the rest of the meeting, I'll try and figure that out.
Or we can ask Andy, you could send it to Andy and she could forward it out to everyone.
Yeah, I can do that. Why don't I'll just forward this entire email to Andy, and then anybody wants it, she'll forward it out.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but it's also National Bullying Prevention Month. And as we've said in prior meetings, that as elected officials, we want to model the upstanding behavior we ask of our residents. And so without going into details, the resolution is self-explanatory. And so I want to see if there's any questions. And then while I see no hands raised, I'll go to our public if there's any comments. I see no hands raised, and so I go to the directors if this is something that you would like to endorse, and if so, if I could have a motion.
Jones, so moved.
Okay. And a second, please.
Constantine, second.
Constantine and Auden, if you could call the question.
Okay, Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, I. Mock.
Yes.
Mock, I. Turner.
Yes.
Turner, I. Kamei.
Aye.
Kamei, I. Chow.
Aye.
Chow, I. Watanabe.
Yes.
Watanabe, I. Dubois.
Aye.
Dubois, I. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine, I. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, I. Bybee.
Aye.
Bybee, I. Blankley.
Yes.
Blankley, I. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, I. Sayok.
Aye.
Sayok, I. And Zhao.
Aye.
And Zhao, I. With 14 ayes, the motion carries.
Thank you. We move to item number 5. I'm sorry.
I think only 13 are present, aren't they?
Actually, Councilmember Mock has joined us. So. And we now move to item number 5, which is an update from our planning collaborative on the Let's Talk Housing discussions that have been happening throughout the county. Andy, I'm going to defer to you to do a quick staff recap before introducing our guests.
I'm sorry about that. Just as a reminder, instead of forming an arena subregion, our cities and the county work together to form a planning collaborative. And the planning collaborative is supposed to help utilize our resources effectively and to help all of our cities work on their housing element update. Joining us today is Josh Abrams from Baird and Driscoll, who is our consultant with our planning collaborative, and we have several consultants, and they're here to give you an update. And I think you're going to see some nice parallels to things that we talked about during our racial justice and things that the planning collaborative is working with our housing folks and your community development directors. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Am I sharing my screen? Is that how we're doing it?
Yep. Is that okay? Or do you want me to?
Yeah. No, that's great.
Okay.
Give me 1 second to click the right button. Great. Hi again. I am Josh Abrams with Baird and Driscoll, and I am helping facilitate the Santa Clara County Planning Collaborative. It's really exciting. I think I've been talking with Santa Clara County for many, many years about the idea of doing it, and it's great to see it up and off and going. I'm going to talk a little about our work plan update, talk a little about Let's Talk Housing, that shared effort. New laws, I think, are on many people's minds. So I think we'll divert some of our resources to help with that. And we would love to get your feedback. So again, the goals of the Planning Collaborative is to support excellent housing policy, to save jurisdictions time and resources, and all doing that in a understanding, respecting local autonomy, that each jurisdiction is going to figure out the best policy for themselves. If we can make it easier for them to adopt policy, if we can be of assistance, that's great. But at the same time, most decisions will happen at the local level. So a brief on the funding. The cities agreed to all put in $10,000 to kind of jumpstart the collaborative, and then there was state funding that came through the ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments. So you see there was 160,000 that the jurisdictions put in, and then there was about 615,000 that can be spread over 3 years to support that work. I think at some point jurisdictions will have to decide if it's worth continuing, if they're feeling enough value from it, because we don't think the REAP or the state funding will continue. We've been working with cities on sites inventory. I think that's a lot on people's minds. We've been doing both general technical assistance and training and also one-on-one meetings with cities. What we tried to do is help cities understand their options and their numbers before releasing an RFP, because if you have a little better sense of how much rezoning you have to do, you can get a better, more competitive RFP. Not the proposals for RFPs are super, they tend to be high this cycle anyway, but hopefully they're a little better than they would be if we hadn't worked with cities to understand the rules. We're doing a lot on affirmatively furthering fair housing, helping take the work that's already started and then apply it to tailor to housing elements. There was some interest in community local preference ordinances, so we're going to develop some resources for that. Specifically, that's if you have an affordable housing policy to help make sure local residents can have access to that affordable housing. And then a lot of our time lately has been put into community engagement, and I'll talk more about that. But one of the series of trainings for jurisdictions, and then one of the trainings, actually, just give you a sense, one of the trainings we're upcoming in a week or two is how to do the simultaneous interpretation on Zoom. So for cities that haven't done that before, we'll just do a little 20-minute, half an hour training so they're a little more comfortable. Just one little example. We also have this Let's Talk Housing SCC.org website, where it kind of serves as a jumping off point for anyone in the county looking for information about housing elements. And people can, if cities have their own housing element pages, they can get pointed to there, or if they want to just use a subpage on Let's Talk Housing SCC, they could use that as their housing element page. And then an equity advisory group, which I'll go into more in a second. So we did a first round of county meetings where we paired cities and we started discussing some of the common things together, and then broke into breakout rooms with each individual city. You can see the participants. We had several in the almost 600, I think, people from throughout the county who participated. We'll have those meetings summaries out soon. Just a sample, just one of the things, this kind of ties into the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements. And these are new or beefed up rules of making sure that both our housing policies reach a broad set of the population, and also that our outreach does. And we're really encouraging jurisdictions to track who comes to meetings, because I think we all have a sense that the representation at meetings isn't necessarily equal to what's in the community. But until you see the numbers, you can't really know where you need to do better. So we're encouraging, and we'll do this first round for jurisdictions if they're interested, showing both the age and the race and how long people have been in the community. And if cities are interested, it'll just give them a sense of maybe they should put more effort into a neighborhood that heavily renters, or a strategy that's more likely to get working families than older families. If comparing those two demographic percentages, you see that it's skewing one way or the other. So we'll get the recordings in the meetings up, and then we start in the equity outreach, and then we're talking about doing countywide webinars and workshop series that we actually just met with the planning directors today, and they suggested maybe a slightly different focus of kind of on-demand topic videos instead of another set of meetings. So with that last bullet might change. I'm going to talk about Equity Advisory Committee. I think that's the next slide. No, it's not. So I'll talk about it now. So we put together a panel of 15 nonprofit groups, and we wanted to do it countywide because a lot of them work in multiple cities, and they're helping advise us and cities about how to do really good, thorough outreach to the communities, particularly communities of color that have been underrepresented before. So we have some projects, we're giving them stipends, and we have some projects for them to work on, like helping collect videos or housing stories. And then we're also going to help pair them with cities. So as cities talk about, know when they have outreach activities, they can reach out to stakeholder groups and make sure those groups can participate or have a role. And then one other thing along with that is we're going to organize, we're calling them listening sessions, where groups that work throughout the county can talk to the jurisdiction staff. And again, it doesn't make sense to go one-on-one. So we'll get everyone together in a room, and it could be nonprofit housing developers, it could be advocates, it could be for-profit housing developers, a number of these sessions where they can just talk about what their priorities are and how they see the issues. And jurisdiction staff, again, it'll be up to jurisdictions what to do with that information, but at least it's a good format for getting feedback about that. Transitioning to new laws. This wasn't really on our work plan, but I think with SB 9, it suddenly jumped to very high on our work plan. I think everyone's really concerned with good reason about the implications. So we're both producing some material and some handouts. And then also the planning directors asked us, and we're going to see if it's possible, but maybe to coordinate, to see if it makes sense to do a multi-city RFP for objective design standards as soon as possible to trying to get ahead of the January 1st deadline. So that's one idea that we're exploring right now. And then I think I'll just say the other law, it's been a frustrating legislative session, particularly AB 215. It adds a 30-day public comment period and a 10-day response time before you can submit your housing element to HCD, as well as 30 more days for HCD to review. So it in effect adds 2.5 months to the timeline to get a certified housing element, which this late in the game is really hard for a lot of jurisdictions to do. It's signed, there's nothing to do about it at this point, but I just think it's important for people to know about. Oh, and then so SB 9, technical assistance. So we already did a webinar to help jurisdictions get up to speed. You can watch it there if you want, though I have to say it's aimed at a very staff level, like very in the weeds. We're developing an infographic, presentation slides, and a template staff report for jurisdictions to use as they do presentations. It's been hard for us. It's just happening so very quickly. I know a lot of you want your staff to present about as soon, and some of them might already have, but hopefully we can get our material out in the next week or two, and jurisdictions staff can use it to help build on a presentation if they're going to do it to you, or answer questions to the members of the public. We're also pooling resources with other counties and with ABAG to develop a little more thorough resources, and to hire a law firm to advise on the bill, which someone referred to as a rough draft at legislation. There's a lot of lack of clarity. And those are all my points. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And so I look to the directors. Any questions of Mr. A? Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I wondered if you had any information yet on how SB 9 will affect housing elements will cities be able to assign a certain number of housing units, to Arwood neighborhoods essentially?
We think you'll probably be able to do some. That Turner Center did a report, which is some information to estimate what production's likely to be. It'll probably be similar to accessory dwelling units where it'll be based on likely production. The problem is we don't have ADUs. We have a couple-year track record since the law changed in most jurisdictions. SB 9, we don't. We're actually setting up, I don't think we have it scheduled yet, but we've picked a bunch of people from across the state who we think would have good insight, and we're going to set up a brainstorming session about how, and then make a proposal to HCD about how to count those units. So we're working on it. We're working on it quickly, though it's definitely a hard nut to crack.
Lisa?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Josh, for that presentation. Just two quick questions. One has to do with the Let's Talk Housing program where you went to different jurisdictions. I'm wondering, we're all different, if there were some common themes that you saw among all the different jurisdictions.
Yeah, so I wasn't in every room, but I would say my one theme was obviously housing is a controversial issue, but at the meetings at least, there was a pretty vocal pro-housing component, people who are really concerned about the price, the affordability of housing, and that the stress or the tension point most often was single family neighborhoods and what to do with those. Some people feeling like it makes sense to slowly add duplexes and others, and other people feeling like they should be protected. In some ways, that stress has been alleviated by state legislation, though cities still will have a lot of choices about how to implement those legislations. We'll get out the meeting summary hopefully in the next week or two, and we'll try and draw some more big picture conclusions as well as have the jurisdiction specific information.
Great, thank you. And our council is scheduled to have a study session on SB 9 and what we need to do as a city to comply with SB 9 and related housing mandates. And it's on Tuesday, October 26th. And so I don't know if you'll have your materials ready by then, but I'm curious whether or not it would include that. I know you said you're still putting it together and it said technical assistance for compliance, but will it also include, what do cities need to do in order to comply? For example, we've heard a lot about the objective standards, but will your materials cover that area?
Yeah, so we actually charged Goldfarb and Littman, the law firm, with developing that checklist of what cities have to do. And then the pattern is Goldfarb and Littman writes it, and it's very legalese, which is good. And then we translate it to a little more informational, but it's on Goldfarb and Littman's work plan.
Great. If it's ready before October 26th, I'm sure the Los Altos staff would appreciate getting those materials.
We'll push. I mean, I think the first set of products is like the handout, FAQ, and PowerPoint, and then the next set is kind of some of that other stuff that goes into a little more details. But we'll see if we can get it out in 2 weeks. It seems like.
Andy?
I thought that it might be helpful, Josh, if you shared with them at all the different levels of how you're trying to coordinate with the planning collaborative, with the community development directors, planning directors, and housing, about, like HCD is working on guidance, and then ABAG is also hiring people through REAP money. If you could just, I think that they would, and that how you're trying to coordinate all of that so that our money is being spent wisely.
Yeah, there's definitely some opportunities where we can tap into that state or regional money. So the state's doing some model ordinances, inclusionary zoning, and some other things like that may be helpful. So there's tying into that. There's a bunch of things coming out of ABAG, and there's definitely resources like hiring Goldfarb and Littman is just coming straight out of the ABAG budget. And then the region also did a series of trainings and a series of handouts, other things like that. So they've been really active this cycle in doing technical assistance. They're also doing a whole work group on missing middle that's going to meet 6 times, where a number of Santa Clara County staff are participating in that, and a wildfire work group. So there's all these products coming out from there, mostly with keeping the local money, because it's not as big as a pot as the ABAG money. It's mostly things like things that can't happen at the regional level. So we'll be taking that ABAG product and tailoring it, or doing the outreach, or doing the education, the like kind of one-on-one question answering, or a little more hand-holding. In some cases, taking that ABAG material and customize it, or in other cases, just if ABAG hasn't prioritized something, to develop it using the Santa Clara County money, which actually in this case is coming from REAP too, from the region too, but is supplemented with that 10,000 that each city put in. And I'll say one thing that's nice is having that little bit of local money really helps, because there's some activities that don't meet the statutory requirements of the ABAG money, like helping cities with their local preference ordinances. And it's nice to have a little bit of other money. If something's a priority for cities, we can still do it.
Thank you. Any other questions? And so I looked at, are there any public comments? So, and
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So where's the affordability component on this, on SB 9?
I don't think SB 9 has any. I'm sure not an expert on SB 9 yet. I don't think there are too many people are. I don't think there's any affordability requirements in SB 9 per se. Though I think there's some pretty good evidence that a duplex would be, or a quad would be more affordable by its nature than a large single family home. We're just talking about this in the missing middle group. So there's going to be some natural affordability, which is nice, but that's not going to get us down. It depends what level. I mean, if you're looking to be 10 or 20% cheaper than typical market prices per square foot, they might get that, which is good. I mean, everything's good. But if you're really concerned about very deep affordability, I don't think SB 9 is going to be the vehicle to get there.
Stanley?
Simple question on SB 9. What are the allowances for infrastructure? That is the undergrounding of utilities, the establishment of sewer lines, and perhaps the establishment of fiber optic cable, water systems, transportation systems. Are there any allowances for that, or is that mandated that the cities must provide that?
I will add that to the FAQ. I'm not sure the answer to that yet, but we have a very long and growing list of FAQs, and we'll add that. We'll add that question.
That was like 4 different questions.
So let me capture them all. Our cities. So I think you're asking, can cities require developers or SB 9 users to pay for utilities, right? Did I capture it?
Actually, are the cities being mandated to provide infrastructure? That's the general question. And that extends to electricity. Well, whatever the infrastructure happens to be. Who pays for the infrastructure? Is it the developer, or is it the town?
Sure.
Or is it the individual that's developing?
Right. So I think, just trying to think how it might play out is, my guess is if a utility extension is needed, the town wouldn't be required to pay for the extension. But if there's already utilities there, can the town charge a hookup fee or a sewer capacity fee to recover the costs? And I can look into that. Okay, good. If there's more to your question, let me know.
I think that probably there will be some litigation going forward. And I just don't know where this is going to stand. I don't know how to frame this, but the only constant that I could see today is change. So I just need to know what is it today and how do we deal with it going into the future?
Okay, I'll add that to the FAQ. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn to our public, and if we can allow Roland to speak and provide 3 minutes of public comment.
Thank you. So I want to apologize ahead of time because I'm going to come up with a lot of background information before I get to my question, which is, do we have a similar situation in Santa Clara County and how do we address it? So here we go. It's just north of us, just south of Redwood City, is an area I've been really interested in for probably the last 10 years because I come from Europe and I looked at that and I thought, wow, this is a dividend waiting to happen. Why isn't anything happening here? So I scratched my head for, I guess, 9 years, and then came Plan Bay Area. And I watched all the presentations and I saw what ABAG were doing. And essentially what they did is they took the 2020 census data and they used that to map census tracts and then give them an equity rating because equity is a big thing. By the way, in this presentation, I look for equity. I got one head, which is this advisory committee. I don't know what it does. Maybe that's where the answer is. And I looked at it and I said, this is very interesting. And then I went to South Redwood City and bang, I mean, mapping exactly, literally to the square yard. Hey, there was my area known as an equity priority area, which means it is about the most desolate, disaster you can probably think of. On the one side, you got Redwood City, and the other side, you got Atherton. And why isn't anything happening there in the middle? So the next thing I did is I attended a housing planning committee in Redwood City, and that's where suddenly I went boom. And I saw this extraordinary planning they were doing in Redwood City. I mean, it's just they're in a different world over there. But there was absolutely nothing happening in this little area I was interested in. So I asked the question, why? And you know what the answer was? It's because it's unincorporated. That's the answer. That's why nothing is happening there. So my question here to this group, do you know of similar situations in Santa Clara County when we have got essentially affluent neighborhoods in incorporated areas directly adjacent to absolutely dilapidated, desolate neighborhoods in unincorporated area? And if so, what is the solution? What do we do about it? How do we restore equity between those two adjacent neighborhoods? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Would anyone else like to speak? I see no hands raised, and so I bring this back to, I'll close public testimony, bring this back to our directors. No action is needed today, but I wanted to see if there were any follow-up questions. Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Josh, and we look forward to that growing FAQ list that you're.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Have a good evening.
Absolutely. And now we move to agenda item number 6. This is informational as well. Per our bylaws, I am asked to create a nominating committee, which I've done, which composes of myself, Vice Mayor Jones, as well as Councilmember Abikoga. And we put together a slate that we are announcing today for next year, 2022's Executive Board. It comprises of Vice Mayor Chappie Jones as president, Councilmember Margaret Abikoga as first vice president, Mayor Nisa Fliger as second vice president, Secretary and Treasurer Mayor Rich Constantine, and then I will move into Mayor Klein's position as past president. Our goal is to, these are the positions that are identified in our bylaws, as well as the positions we will carry forward to our new GAPA. You'll probably notice that we did not identify the LAC chair. Our goal is to bring the executive board to an odd number of 5. And so incorporating the second vice president position with the legislative action committee chair so that we get to that. And so it's informational item. This will be brought back at a future meeting where we will actually have the election. And as we do with our bylaws, we also take other nominations from the floor, but wanted to provide that information to all of you. Any questions on this? And is there, oh yes, so Tom?
Yeah, just a quick one. You mentioned the upcoming JPA, and it's also mentioned in the staff report. When will the cities get to weigh in on the JPA? Like, is that going to go out to city attorneys? Like, what's the timing?
Okay, and Gary, if I can turn to you on the process. I know that you have been working on it quite fervently with Andy, but if you can answer the question.
Sure. I can't give an exact timeline because it's dependent upon how long each step takes. But we have a rough draft that's been worked through with the executive director and myself. That's going to be presented to a committee who's going to review it. And our current process, but this has not been ratified by that committee or by our president, is that we would then submit it to all the city attorneys, and there'd be a certain amount of time for the city attorneys to review it. And then, well, actually, I've skipped a step. It's going to then go to our executive board and then get their approval. And then we're going to determine whether or not we then probably would then send it to the city attorneys for their review, brief time to review it, and then a meeting of all the city attorneys to review it and get all the input. And then it would come back to our full board for their approval and then go out to the cities. So there'll be multiple opportunities for input from the original committee that's reviewed it, the executive board and the board of directors, the city attorneys, and then the cities themselves would get the last approach. So that's our intent. If you have some other ideas or some other ways you wish to for us to consider for circulating, we're more than happy to consider those. But I can't state that as a decision or a fait accompli because it hasn't really been ratified, and some of this is in my head and it's not been run up the flagpole entirely.
Is there a ballpark timeline for that whole process?
If ideally it would be within the next 3 months, but it's hard to do this because I can't tell you how much time each step will take.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Liang?
So maybe I missed the meeting. When did the Cities Association discuss the pros and cons of forming a JPA, and what's the financial estimates of different options? So is that in any of the meetings that I can go take a look? So pros and cons of
on when we began these discussions?
We began the first discussions until August of 2017. And it has, last year there was a vote of the board of directors, and I will find exactly, I believe it was last fall. And we had a lengthy presentation of whether becoming a 501, likely a 501 C3 or a C6 versus becoming a JPA. And there was a motion then to become a JPA. And it was, I believe it was a unanimous vote, but I will find the exact meeting and send that to you and send it to everyone.
Great, thank you. So what's the finance, in terms of finance, what's the difference? Do you remember?
The finances are, we're required to do a few different things. We're required to have yearly audits, which we don't have a yearly audit now. We have, right now in our bylaws, we have an audit every 2 years. And so when you become a JPA, you're required to do an audit every 2 years. Other than that, there are no more financial requirements that I believe we are required to do that would change the association.
Andy, I believe if you could share with afterwards the directors what staff report that meeting was on.
Yep.
So,
I'm looking for it right now.
shared. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do I have anyone from the public who'd like to speak on item number 6? Okay. Seeing none, I now turn to Town Manager Pravetti for the Santa Clara County City Managers Association update.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. The city managers met yesterday and we continued our conversation on COVID-19 coordination. Our conversation focused on vaccine and testing mandates, as well as our meetings, who's going hybrid, who's working for in-person meetings, and who is staying on Zoom. We also had a conversation with the county executive regarding the new mask criteria and when Santa Clara County might meet those criteria to end the mask mandate for indoors. And it looks like we still have several months ahead of wearing masks indoors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And any questions? And is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, if I could turn to Executive Director update. Andy?
So I was going to talk about the JPA in the process, so we've already done that. But we are hoping in about 3 months that we have more information for you. Also, I wanted to let you know that Valley Water is having a drought summit on Saturday, October 23rd, from 9:30 to 12:30. And I, in a follow-up email for tonight's, I will send you this information as well as the information of the meeting where we discussed the JPA. And then also I wanted to let you know that we will, at our next month's meeting, we are hoping to have Life Moves join us. And next month we will also be having a budget discussion to discuss where we are in our budget and what we need to do regarding our budget.
Questions? And any public comment? Seeing none, I will open it up. Actually, I'm going to switch the order. I'm going to see if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on open comments for the application. Seeing no hands raised, bring it back to the directors and see if there's anyone that would like to share any joys and challenges. Hopefully more joys than challenges. Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. Well, let's see. I would share that the joy for the city of Santa Clara was the 52nd annual Parade of Champions this past Saturday, and it was a great success, and 88 entries, and just everything that you would ever want to see in a parade was there, including our well-known Santa Clara Vanguard that always finishes up the parade. So that was definitely a joy. And I would say for everybody who is on this committee right now, if you're a San Francisco Giant fan, the challenge is the fact that the score is tied 1-1 in the top of the 8th. So go Giants. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Rich?
I have a joy and a challenge. I'll do the joy first. We just in Morgan Hill just hired Brittany Sherman as our economic development coordinator. And if anyone knows our Chamber of Commerce, Brittany Sherman is the president of the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce. So she is now working on Team Morgan Hill, and we're very excited about that. My challenge is, how did I get chosen as treasurer? Just teasing. But we're moving forward in Morgan Hill. So, and go Giants. A friend of mine from my fraternity, his son is pitching. I don't know if is Webb still pitching.
Oh,
Probably not in the 8th inning.
that's very impressive. Huh? Anyone else? Stanley?
As of tomorrow, looking forward, we will have a new city manager.
Oh,
So that is a joy, and I can't name him yet. So, however, we've been working on this for quite some time, and there is a tremendous process that we've established in getting a new city manager. So, really happy about that. And yes, I would like to have the Giants win. So let's go Giants.
Congratulations on the new city manager. Anyone else would like to share? And I know I switched things around, and so Roland, I will give you an opportunity to speak under public comment. Roland, would you still like to join us?
Yeah, as soon as you give me an unmute, thank you. So, sorry about that, but actually what I would like to present you is a challenge for the VTA board members who are, helping us out with their presence tonight and that's tomorrow morning. And I want to tell you what that challenge is. It's called the BAR Project. The BAR Project has gone to the point where it is posing an existential threat to the VTA as an agency, as well to the board itself. The last time BART and the VTA met was last December, and they left staff and consultants with clear directions on how to resolve outstanding issues with the project, which were primary tunnel design safety issues and station access, from both sides of the street in Santa Clara. And fast forward 1 year, and BART and VTA had both been focusing on ridership recovery because of COVID, obviously, and the VTA were additionally impacted because of what happened in June. In the meantime, the consultants had pretty much carried on, as if nothing happened. And now they're ready to go out and issue multi-billion-dollar contracts. And the problem that we have is, first of all, what is it exactly that's going to go out there? And that's going to be discussed extensively tomorrow morning. But the next question is, how do we pay for it? Because these smart consultants have come up with this brilliant FTA, expedited project delivery, which is basically expedited funding delivery, that caps federal funding at 25%. And the impact to us is north of $2 billion we are leaving on the table. Instead of doing like San Francisco, going to a federal New Start program and getting close to 50% from the federal government. But that's not all, because now, looking internally at VTA books and internal records, we've discovered that the cost of phase one is essentially double what has been reported. It is closer to $5 billion than the $2.4 billion that have been reported. And that is profoundly concerning, because we are at the point now where the Measure A is so debt-ridden that it no longer has the capacity for us to be drawing any more funding for it. Measure A is due in 15 years. We owe approximately $800 million right now, and we're looking at $1.3 billion in debt service at the rate of $70 million a month. And that is going to be on the table tomorrow. The only response from the VTA so far, they've got a new RFP out there for a new auditor, and that's it, nothing else. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. And good night, everyone. If you're going to go catch the end of the game, meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Wow, that was relatively smooth.
That was good. I thought they were going to talk